A boy begins to suspect something is terribly wrong when his brother locks himself in his room for days, and his parents pretend nothing is unusual. As silence and casseroles pile up, the truth becomes more horrifyingly real than anything supernatural. My brother hadn't left his room in 3 days. Our parents wouldn't let me visit him. On the third night, with Jacob still holed up, I finally gathered the courage to speak to Mom. "People don't sleep that long," I said. She was making another casserole, her 6th this week. The fridge was nearly full, but she kept cooking. I watched from the corner of the kitchen as she moved, stiff-backed, her newly gray hair dangling over the food. I stepped closer and tugged on her sleeve. She didn't react. She was spreading butter on the top crust. "Mom," I said, "can you hear me? He needs to regain his strength," she replied calmly. "We shouldn't disturb him." Before I could answer, Dad walked into the kitchen. His eyes were red and puffy, but he wore a smile. He held 3 cans of Coke. "I'm starving," he said. "I can still taste that awful cafeteria crap. I thought hospitals were supposed to have good food, considering how much they charge," Mom said. "Yeah, right." Dad scoffed and set the cans on the counter. Mom didn't want us entering Jacob's room, but I was starting to get worried. I peeked out of the kitchen. His room was at the end of the hallway, like a forgotten lighthouse. The only sign of life was a New York Yankees poster taped to the door. There was a sliver of space between the door and the floor, just enough to see if the light was on. It wasn't. It hadn't been for 3 days. I turned back to Mom. "Shouldn't we check on him?" I asked. "I don't get why Wendy's or Burger King don't open little cafes inside hospitals," Dad said. "Hundreds of people waste time there every day. It's a goldmine." "It's politics," Mom replied. "They sign contracts so big they're impossible to break." "Yeah, makes sense. It really does." Dad stood beside her, his face inches from the casserole. He took a deep breath. "MMM," he said. "Smells amazing. If you want," Mom offered, "while the new one's in the oven, we can reheat some leftovers." I think we still have some from yesterday. The spinach and ricotta one was good, wasn't it? "Delicious. So good," Dad said. I couldn't stop eating. "Jacob will eat too, once he's hungry," Mom added. I turned and stepped into the hallway. The space between me and his room stretched like a tightrope. As the smell of casserole faded, I caught another scent. Something older, like used gym socks. Even with Mom's army of candles and incense, it pushed through. It always did. The last time I saw Jacob was when we brought him home from treatment. His skin had a pale green hue, and his eyes kept rolling back. Mom told me to keep talking to him, to keep him grounded. I told him about some kids at school who pranked the teacher by leaving tacks on her chair. It wasn't true. I'd seen it in a show, but I was running out of things to say. Not that it mattered. Jacob didn't respond. He just coughed. Pink saliva dribbled down his t-shirt. "Maybe you could reheat the leftovers?" Mom asked. "Let's all eat together. Spinach and ricotta tonight." "I can't stop thinking about it," Dad said. "I dreamed about it last night." I ignored them, focusing on Jacob's door. I didn't dream about casseroles. Last night, I had another dream. Jacob barged into my room and flicked my ear. It was our old game. We tiptoed to each other's door, wait, then burst in and deliver a couple of ear flicks before running. In the dream, Jacob kept flicking my ear, laughing, flicking again. I didn't move. I just stood there. He flicked me so hard my ear flew off. "Snap out of it, Danny," Dad said, snapping his fingers in front of my face. He was standing in front of Jacob's door, blocking it. Would you mind reheating 4 portions of casserole in case Jacob's hungry? We'll eat them while the new one bakes. I want him to try this one. Your mom outdid herself. I looked up at him and stared. I couldn't say what I was thinking, so I tried to make him feel it instead. Maybe if I looked long enough, he'd understand. But he only met my eyes for a second, then looked away. In that second, though, I saw something I didn't want to see. Like staring down the tunnel of the deepest well on earth. Come on, he said. He put a hand on my shoulder and turned me back toward the kitchen. His voice lowered. Better to heat each piece separately. If you warm them all at once, some get too hot, others stay cold. Jacob won't enjoy it properly if it's uneven. He took his hand off me and walked ahead. I lingered a moment longer in the hall. I turned to look at Jacob's door one last time. I thought about walking to it, opening it. But I was scared Mom would yell. Truth is, I never liked going in there. There was always a puke bucket beside his bed, full of pink sludge, and tufts of hair on the pillows. Even before his last hospital stay, Mom used to make me go talk to him. I'd pretend I had a cold and didn't want to infect him. When that didn't work, I'd sit with him for a few minutes, watching him struggle to breathe. I'd tell him about some show I saw on TV, then run back to my room. I looked up, thinking I was heading to the kitchen. But my feet carried me to his door. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't stop, like a puppet on strings. I placed my hand on the doorknob, turned it, opened the door. The smell hit me like helium in my skull. Old Jim's socks. In the darkness, I could just make out his face, lit faintly by the evening light. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. His arms lay flat, fingers curled like rose petals. I approached the bed. Red drool trickled from his mouth. Jacob looked like a sad clown. I flicked his ear. It was stiff. I walked out and shut the door behind me. On the way back, I realized I couldn't remember what his room looked like. Behind that door, he could have been doing anything. Burpees, reading comics, planning his next year attack. Back in the kitchen, I reheated 4 plates of spinach and ricotta casserole. When they were ready, I wrapped Jacob's portion in foil and placed it in the oven to keep warm. Then Mom, Dad, and I sat at the table, and we ate in silence. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling like something inside me was being slowly twisted. I kept thinking about Jacob, his frozen face, the red drool, his ear. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked into the kitchen in silence, where Dad was already sitting. He was flipping through a newspaper, though I hadn't seen anyone bring in the mail for days. Mom was at the stove. Another casserole. 6th, 7th. You look pale today, she said, without turning around. You probably didn't sleep well. I nodded silently. Your father, and I think you should go out for a walk. A change of scenery might help. But I didn't go. I couldn't. I didn't want to leave Jacob alone, even dead. I felt like if I left, they'd erase it, get rid of the body, wipe everything clean. The whole day passed in a haze. I drank tap water. Didn't eat. No one mentioned Jacob. Not once. In the evening, I went back to his door. It was closed again. I sat on the floor next to it and listened. Silence. Not peaceful, heavy, suffocating silence. Like in a room where someone had died. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know why we were all pretending. Why nobody called the police, or a doctor, or anyone. When I dialed 911, my finger trembled. I almost hit call, but stopped. What would I say? That my brother was dead, and my parents, what? That they were pretending he was alive? Still cooking for him? That no one but me had looked at his face? I put the phone down. The next morning, I woke to a sound. A thud. Heavy, dull, like someone had dropped something big. I rushed to the kitchen. Everything was spotless. Mom was at the sink, washing her hands. Next to her stood a large trash can, the kind we usually kept outside. "What was that noise?" I asked. She turned to me slowly. "Old pots. Decided to throw them out. No point keeping what we don't need." Dad walked in and opened the fridge. "Any casserole left?" "In the oven," Mom replied without looking at him. I walked down the hallway again. Jacob's door now open. The room was empty. The bed was made. The bucket was gone. Posters taken down. Everything gone. Like he had never lived there. I stood in the middle of the room, breathing in. Nothing. No smell. No trace. Like someone had disinfected every inch. "He left," Mom said behind me. I flinched. "Where?" I asked. He remembered something. Said he had to go. "Far away." "He's dead," I said quietly. "I saw him." "You didn't do anything. He died 3 days ago." Mom said nothing, then lowered her gaze. "People don't just die," she said. "But sometimes they decide to stop." I felt sick. "You left him there?" "We didn't know what to do." He was already cold, and we weren't ready. Dad stood in the doorway, holding a plate. "And then you walked in, and it got complicated." I looked at them, their red-rimmed eyes. The casseroles, the small talk, the food, just a way not to talk about the real thing. They weren't insane. They were broken. And so was I. I left the room, walked down the hall, opened the front door, and stepped outside. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew that if I stayed, they would bake me next. Not literally. Worse.